Hello everybody, hope you're doing fantastically well. It's Connor here and we are back with another One Leeds video. Let's get into it, but before we get into it, I should say, we do have a Patreon account. If you guys aren't aware of that, you can go hit the link in the description below if you want some bonus content. We will have a Generation Leeds podcast out tomorrow, reviewing the Southampton game, talking all transfer business, talking Leeds' season so far and what me and my old man think about it. So if you want to check that sort of stuff out, come over, help out the Patreon, help out the general running of the channel. I really do appreciate that. And to all the subscribers on here, thank you so much for your continued support. Really do appreciate it. Make sure you're liking, commenting and subscribing just so it shows up in the YouTube algorithm and the video is spread to the Leeds masses. And without any further ado, let's get into it. So what is going on? Well, Leeds United play Southampton under-21s tonight, which when there is no football on, it becomes a big spectacle. This is almost like the game of the weekend, really, isn't it? We're going to see players like Wilfried Gnonto. We're probably going to see players like Junior Firpo, obviously Liam Cooper, Patrick Bamford, all feature, which is going to be very exciting. I'm particularly excited to see Wilfried Gnonto. I have to say it'd be good if Darko JB, after the video I did the other day, basically saying to you guys how excited I am about seeing him in the flesh in the first team at some point, was to feature as well. And there's a lot to look on tonight with this, with the setup and you know how Wilfried Gnonto could fit into the first team. Is he going to be explosive enough? If he does make an impression tonight, is Jesse Marsh going to think to himself, well, I can include him on the bench and maybe he can get a 20-minute spell? Because everybody, any pace, any searing pace like that kid has is going to frighten any defence in the Premier League because it puts them on the back foot, puts them on the turn. So, yeah, going to be fascinating to see him with a direct way of playing like we do play. If we're able to expose Wilfried Gnonto against some fullbacks, some centre-backs over the top, it's going to be fascinating to see. So that's one that I'm looking at tonight, 100%. But in terms of news, Luis Sinisterra has made the Colombian national side. Now, the reason I wanted to touch on Luis Sinisterra is because, according to reports already, AC Milan are looking at the Colombian winger. Even though he's been at Leeds for 2 minutes, there are eyes on this guy. Apparently, many clubs were chatting and analysing and observing. Chatting to his agent, observing Luis Sinisterra from afar when he was at Feyenoord, obviously played in the Europa League final as well. So, listen, he's a player who was playing on the same side as well as Tyrell Malacia, who's gone to Manchester United. So that left-hand side was exceptionally good for Feyenoord. And yeah, as I said, he played a Europa League final. So Sinisterra, with those numbers that he put up last season and the numbers that he's already putting up at Leeds United, is going to be a hot property. And I think that would have been Leeds' selling pitch to him. You know, the fact that, unfortunately, and we've seen it plenty of times when we've been discussing Leeds United and we've been discussing how how we would be able to attract the bigger players. You have to sell them the fact that Leeds are going to be a stepping stone to a bigger club at this moment in time. That is the position we are in, and yeah, that's the only way you get players like Sinisterra, get players like Rafinha. But there is definitely a mould there. There's definitely a blueprint of, you know, what Leeds have done before. Look, we can sell you the profile of Rafinha. This is where he's gone to, and that is the market that Leeds are shopping in at the minute. But hopefully when it comes to Luis Sinisterra, he's going to be in a Leeds shirt for a long time, because already you can tell the guile, the ingenuity, the innovativeness, the creativity, the execution of the guy really is. It's top drawer, isn't it? So, yeah, Luis Sinisterra, congratulations. Jesse Marsh has been handed a £10,000 fine and he's been given a 1-match suspension after his antics against Brentford in the 5-2 defeat. Now, do I agree with Jesse Marsh's antics? Not all the time. I think sometimes it can be a bit theatrical. I do like it on the touchline, but apparently within the report there was a lot of expletives used by Jesse Marsh, which I think they did blank out when it zoned in on him on some of the replays on the replays. But listen, when you are making 3 abysmal decisions as VAR did against Leeds United, you can understand the frustration, because Leeds actually, when we played Brentford, we weren't actually that bad. When you take out some of the defensive howlers, when you take out Diego Llorente out of that team, when you get rid of him out of that team, and you're looking at the overall display, Leeds still created chances. We were very, very unlucky not to get maybe 3 or 4 that game. So we're still creating chances. The defence was appalling, granted, but you know, Leeds was still putting themselves in the shop window when it came to actually getting a result out of that one. And I think the refereeing decisions just crippled Leeds. So you can understand the frustration when it comes to Jesse Marsh, but sometimes I just think maybe it is a little bit too much. And his card will be marked now by a lot of the referees, wrongly so in my opinion, because it should all be based on a game-by-game thing. It shouldn't be based on any sort of bias, but that is the world that we live in. So yeah, he's got to be careful now because his card will be marked. So yeah, he's not going to be available for the Villa game, which is obviously it's a bit problematic, isn't it? Because Villa's a huge game for Leeds. He's been given a £10,000 fine. I would just hark back to the Thomas Tuchel debacle saga when he was able to still manage on the sideline against Leeds United when Leeds obviously beat Chelsea 3-0 earlier on. He'd been given a touchline suspension and a fine. And then he was apparently it was all settled before the Leeds United game. He wasn't going to appear, and for some reason there was something in the processing of that touchline ban. And he was able to feature on the touchline, which is just absolutely bizarre. I couldn't get my head around that. I'd understand if the decision hadn't been made, but apparently the decision had been made. It was processed. It was going through the FA. So I've no idea. It seems like one rule for one, another rule for another. And Leeds United have been put on the Forbes top 20 list, which is absolutely fascinating, isn't it? When it comes to wealth and it comes to riches at Ellen Road. I saw a report the other day saying it values Leeds at 690 million. I mean, I don't think that's going to be right, to be quite honest with you. However, you do look at the club and think maybe it's worth 300 to 350 million now, which is a massive hike from what Radrizzani bought it as. And yeah, you've got to look at Leeds going forward now. The Americanization of Leeds United is huge. Even just the growth of YouTube channels, when it comes to American interest, when it comes to people messaging you saying, do you want to do this, do you want to do that, from American stations and American radio and all this sort of stuff. That's just from a personal perspective. But when you look at the globalization of Leeds United, the fact that we actually have got an American presence at the club now is only going to increase the profitability of the club. It's going to benefit the club massively. So it's going to be fascinating to see how much this Americanization of Leeds really does develop in terms of our wealth and our ability to do okay in the transfer market. When you look at the 49ers being there, you look at Jesse Marsh, Brendan Aronson, Tyler Adams. There's been obviously reports of Paxton Aronson coming in at some point as well, Brendan's younger brother. There's consistent talk of a bigger expansion of Americans at Leeds United. So it's going to be fascinating to see the audience growth, because we know with Americans, they tend to follow the players, which is great to see. So yeah, going to be really interesting to see that. It's going to be fascinating to see how Leeds develop in that respect. But another thing I wanted to speak on, guys, and probably the final thing I'm going to speak on in this video, Kalvin Phillips. Gabby Agbonlahor has suggested that Kalvin Phillips should come back to Leeds United on loan. Now, this is a massive talking point. Get your comments in the section below on if he would actually get into this Leeds United setup. Now, from my perspective, he wouldn't. And that is going to be balmy to a lot of people because of how good he was for Leeds. But I think system-wise, he doesn't get into this Leeds United setup anymore. I called this out very, very early on and got dog's abuse for it with Kalvin Phillips, because he was the golden boy at the time. It's funny how people just turn on him when he's moved and all that sort of stuff. I found that very interesting, seeing certain people who absolutely would back him up on any point. Certain people would go to war for Kalvin Phillips, and now suddenly he's made that move. They all hate him. It's very, very bizarre, this toxic football world. However, on a different tangent, I think now you look at the profile of Kalvin within a very narrow, compact system, a very direct system, where he's not going to be, if he did ever come back to Leeds United, he wouldn't be under Jesse Marsh. He wouldn't be sat in front of the back four, spraying balls left, spraying balls right. And I think that is why I wouldn't have him back at Leeds United, because he wouldn't ever come back to Leeds United to be on the bench. Let's be honest with you, that's what he's doing at Man City. But I wouldn't have him back now. If you were to say to me, Kalvin Phillips can come in exchange of Matt Rocker, Kalvin Phillips can come in exchange of Tyler Adams, I would say no. And I think that's why Victor Orta, for a combined fee of probably around 30 million in replacing Kalvin Phillips with those two, has done exceptionally well. I think Matt Rocker's better on the ball. I think he's got a better footballing brain than Kalvin Phillips. He's younger, and I think his ability to spray the ball and his knowing on when to spray the ball, which was Kalvin's best attribute in my opinion in that former Leeds system, is as good, if not better, than Kalvin's. Now, listen, that is just my personal opinion. I am so impressed by what I've seen with Matt Rocker. I think technically him and Sinisterra are the best players in the team. And if you put him alongside Kalvin Phillips, I think in any team, there's a reason Matt Rocker was at Bayern Munich. There's a reason he got, over 100 appearances in La Liga by the age of, 23. I think he's a top player. And you look at someone like Tyler Adams, and he might not have the capabilities of someone like Kalvin Phillips in terms of that distribution. But I think his ball-winning ability there is an argument it's on par, if not better, in terms of just that one-on-one defending, which is what Tyler Adams was brought in for. His ability, his football IQ, I think he's very, very high as well. I think his passing efficiency is not as good as Kalvin's. I don't think he's as accurate, but that's not what he was brought in for. But the split, the dual split of a Tyler Adams and a Mark Rocker, I think is more beneficial than just having a Kalvin Phillips in there. And I think similarly with Mo Kamara, maybe Mo Kamara wouldn't have fit that too. That defensive pivot, that dual pivot, because it doesn't supplement the other one well. And I don't think if Kalvin Phillips was put in a dual pivot, it would supplement the other well at all, even if it was a Matt Rocker or a Tyler Adams. So if you're asking me the question, I would not have Kalvin Phillips back at Leeds United, which is mental. It's a mental thing to say, isn't it? But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Have I gone absolutely balmy with that? Do you think Kalvin Phillips should be, if he was to be, Gabby Bonahor suggested it on TalkSport, to be loaned back out to Leeds, but I don't know where he'd fit in. Would you guys, if you take your bias hat off and put that objective hat on, who would you have him in for? And why, or would you just completely go against that? Really fascinated to see what you guys think on this one. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, and on everything we've said. Check out the Patreon if you want some bonus content, everyone, and we'll see you in a bit.